Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Multifamily Investor Playbook. I'm Mark Faris, and I'm here with my co-host John Makarewicz. We're really excited to be here. The mission of the show is to be the ultimate guide for high net worth multifamily investors. And today we're going to be talking about how to get a resident to enthusiastically, not just to say yes, but to enthusiastically pay more for rent. Okay. The problem with most real estate investors is that they go in on day one and just jack up the rent for everybody. And, they become a villain. And so we have hundreds of residents paying more than we projected for rents by following what we're going to be talking about with you today. John, really great to be here with you.
Yeah, Mark, so excited to be here. Our conversation I'm excited for because it actually reminds me of a lesson my dad taught me very early on, in high school, really. I got my first job at 14 bagging groceries at the, Kroger, which is one of the big grocery chains here in the United States. I was just motivated. I wanted money. I wanted freedom. To me, money equaled freedom. And I guess it still does, right? And so, at 15, I ended up getting a job at a video store and they were looking for a manager. And, I said to my dad, I think I'm going to go for it. And he's like, well, what have you done to show them that you're deserving of that? And really sat down and taught me that in order to get those promotions or to get more value out of life, you need to provide that value first. And you need to show up and you need to, whenever anybody calls out, be the first one to say, I'll take that shift, ask the boss, is there anything I can be doing to help you? Right. And so at Mark Spain Real Estate, I would sometimes mentor these young guys. And it was interesting. People would come and want an increase in commission splits, but they were at the bottom of the conversions, right? And I'm just like, well, show me you can convert and then we'll maybe talk, right? And so that 28-day transformation is really applying that same thought process. It's providing value before you ask for anything in return. And so far it's proven to be a brilliant strategy for us.
Yeah. No, and it's really based around this rule of reciprocity, which is proven out. Robert Cialdini wrote a really great book called Influence, and it's one of his main principles of you had the book, or you're going to
It's
pull
right
it out
there.
there behind
Right
you.
there.
Yeah, it's just one of those classic books, and reciprocity is something that when somebody gives you something, we have an innate nature as human beings to want to be able to give back, right?
Mhm.
And so it's one of those things that when you can apply that to business and especially to real estate investing, it can really catapult your returns in a really big way. And it's
Yeah.
something that we caught on to early, and it's something that we've made it a process. We call it our full out 28-day transformation plan. And so this is something that we implemented right away, and we're just seeing really great fruit from that. So we're going to be diving into that today.
Yeah, no, it's such a wonderful book and one I would recommend to anybody listening. Very highly influential book. A lot of sales strategy has been really written around what he teaches in there. But the law of reciprocity to me was always my favorite. And, just to contextualize it a little bit, they found that just by a server providing a piece or two of candy along with the check increased tips by 20 to 25%. So just that little small gesture, right? Mark, that's how we originally met. Obviously, and I think we shared this story on a previous podcast, but sending that gift, I had to call. I had to find out who is this Mark Faris guy and why is he sending me such a thoughtful gift? And now here we are years later with a business that we formed together. So it's definitely one that, even if you just take that piece away from this conversation, just looking for ways to implement within your own business, small gesture, small gift, doing a favor. They say actually doing a favor for somebody else is the closest way for them to build trust back to you. So you doing something for them and they're like, I really trust that guy, right? So this can sound a little manipulation, but it's just human nature at the end of the day, right? Because we are a society and we all have to function within that society. So when those, in your world do something nice for you, your instincts are to do something nice back. And that's what we've applied to our 28-day transformation concept.
100%. And so those are all great examples, John, that you shared. And so it's really important to know that in general, the buildings that we take over, and it's one of the things that we look for is that they're not being run very effectively. When I'm saying not being run, there's the maintenance side of it, but then there's also the culture of the community, which is something that John and we both scaled multi-million-dollar businesses prior to getting into this. the syndication, the multifamily syndication business. And so the strengths that we had and have that we were able to pull from the previous businesses, that was one of the core foundational reasons why we were successful, is because we were able to build cultures that were built, and they were, we'll say, they were intentional on how we built them to build to create, we'll say, stickiness to the business, where people wanted to come in not because they were just getting a paycheck. They came in because they wanted to be part of the mission. They
Yeah.
wanted to be part of something bigger than them. And so having that understanding that a lot of the buildings that we're going into, they don't have a strong culture. People are just looking at it as, this is a place I'm paying rent, but I don't have any sort of extra, we'll say, ties to the community, other than, I might know my neighbor and, they're just a really nice person, but definitely there's no relationship with the management company.
Yeah, it's a critical factor. The culture within our communities is something we think a lot about. And on the acquisition side, what we look for effectively is a poor culture, right? So we look at the reviews. And so when we see a building that has really bad reviews, we dig in. Now, there could be some that are actually telling you something about the area or the building itself, and you have to listen to that. So maybe it's a reason to shy away from the investment. But what we like to see is, I can never get in touch with the property manager, or the maintenance crew takes 3 days to get to a repair, if ever. Candidly, I was talking with a property manager recently who applied to work for us, and it blew my mind that she shared this example, but it was literally an example of a water leak in a unit. And what I was looking for is, how did she attack that problem? And, she said, well, it happened towards the end of the day. So I told him, our maintenance tech would be out tomorrow. And the whole time I'm sitting here thinking, if you own that building, that water leak maybe started out as a minor repair, but now we're talking about thousands and thousands of dollars. And she just clocked out and went home. And think about, if you're the resident and you got you're putting stuff up on shelves and getting them off the floor so it doesn't get damaged. And so looking for those poorly run communities where we can come in and install our culture. And Mark, it's kind of that small stuff, but just making sure the onboarding is exceptional for that property manager on day one. And we give them some gifts, and, we personally meet with them. You meet with them, discuss our mission and values, and we know really quickly. In fact, we've had situations where we thought we had a strong property manager already at the building when we acquired it. But after hanging out with them for a couple weeks, they select out because, like, geez, I'm not going to be able to keep up with these guys. They're crazy. They have high expectations,
Yeah.
right? And I think
Yeah.
one of the world's biggest issues right now is people have too low of expectations for themselves and others. I think it's something we all need to, push ourselves, push everybody else to be better, right? So high expectations are top of the list for us.
Yeah, 100%. People live up to the expectations that you set for them. And so this is where, for us, the first thing that we do when we want to take over an asset, because it's a race, because what happens is, when you take over a new asset, the residents they're kind of like waiting to see what's going to happen, right? And so if you can make an impact super fast, it is such a wow. It is, because a lot of these assets, what will happen is there'll be residents that live there for multiple years, and maybe there was a number of owners prior to us. And so they have comparison to be able to reflect on what is normal. And if we do something above and beyond, and we do it quickly, like within 28 days, that can really differentiate and show huge appreciation. So the first thing we want to do is change the tone, and change it quickly. And so the culture is something that we're really looking to do. And the first thing, the number one thing to change culture is, in general, we change the property manager as the first thing. Because if the property manager that is at the site, so we have full-time property managers that they sit in, and that's their only job, is to look after that building with all the residents. If they are not friendly, then anything that we do is a lost cause. And so I'll share a quick example. When I was getting Darren Hardy, he's a really strong business coach. He's kind of like the modern day Napoleon Hill. And I was getting mentored from him. And so one of the stories he shared is that when he went to the Marriott, he was meeting I believe it was the vice president of the Marriott. And so he walked in, he was going to meet him the next day. So he went the night before. He walked in in the evening, he met the bellman. Bellman was super friendly. And then he walked into the front desk there, and the lady greeted him and she was super friendly. He went up to his room. He ordered room service. They brought the food up. They were super friendly. And the next day, he met the vice president and said, "How on earth do you train everybody to be so friendly? I want to know for my business and I want to coach all of my students. I want to know. How do you train everybody to be so friendly? I got to know." Because everybody I met so far is friendly. And the vice president kind of looks at it. He's like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Just everybody's friendly. I want to know. How do you do it?" He thinks about it for a moment. He says, He's like, "We don't train people to be friendly. We hire friendly people."
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
when Darren heard this, it was like this light bulb went off. He's like, "Oh, man."
Yeah.
And so the story underlines such a great point. And the point is that we don't take bets on trying to change people. Okay. We'll never take a bet on, yeah, we're going to try and make somebody friendly. We go through the process and we ensure to hire somebody that is innate friendly right from the get-go. And by doing that, that is the first step to having a strong culture within a community.
No, it's like building a sports team, right? And there's actually examples where folks that are now considered to be some of the greatest of all time just ended up on the wrong team and the wrong culture and struggled. Joe Namath was a good example of that. And once he found his right coach and right team, the rest is history. So, for us, it's something I've had to learn the hard way in my career. But unfortunately, you can't fix people. You just can't. And certainly sometimes you have an A player that has a temporary thing happening in their life, and you can coach and help them through that. But it really is about finding and hiring the right person. And the way we think about it is somebody who's better than we are at that particular thing. And so I think about one of the folks that's working at our Charleston portfolio, 20 plus years experience, in property management. He just loves it. It's like his favorite thing. He just absolutely gets so much pleasure from it. And, we had somebody prior to that person that we thought was a good fit, but, at the end of the day, they couldn't take the time to memorize or learn the resident's name. They didn't have it in them. It just wasn't who they were as a person. And so it's true. You've got to find the right person. It's like building an all-star NBA team.
John, what are some of the things, outside of friendly? Okay, that's like table stakes for us. That's like really important. But I mean, you're such a big part of, finding the right property manager. So what are perhaps some traits, other
Yeah.
traits that you look for to say, because, it's a quite extensive process, and we'll do another whole conversation on how we actually go through the hiring process, because, we've hired, both John and myself, we've hired hundreds of people through our careers. And so we have a set process that we follow on there. But John, just maybe for a high level, what are some of the other traits that you say, yes, this could be a great potential property manager for us?
Yeah, yeah, 100%. So really it boils down to their core behavior. There's a lot of science out there and there's many different approaches to arrive at behavior. And I think it's, a key point to make as well is that personality layers on top of behavior. So, you might see two people with similar behavior, but vastly different kind of approaches just because of their personality, how they grew up, generationally, or what part of the country or wherever, maybe what country they grew up in. Countries have their own cultures, but I talk about behavior because there are key attributes that we look for. And for a property manager, one of them is results orientation. At the end of the day, they need to be as wrapped up in the financials as we are. They need to be excited to see profit grow and income grow and expenses reduce. So of course we incentivize when we find the right person. Part of their bonus structure is around that. So that results orientation is strong. There are people out there that are okay with okay, and they're like, well, we're at 89% occupancy, but I looked at some of the comps and they're all at 89. And it's like, we don't want to be average. We want to be above average. Exceptional really is the word. And so, being comfortable is not something we're comfortable with. It has to be somebody who has that inherent kind of desire to get results and to grow and to improve. Another factor we look for is detail orientation, especially at the property manager level, because they are dealing with financials and they may be overseeing hundreds of residents, all with individual wants and needs and concerns and lives and just experience. And so the detail orientation, and then that also relates into social ability. So, just a genuine love of people, which is actually one of our core values at both Faris Capital Partners and Faris Residences. But somebody who really just is excited to see other people get excited. And when they provide great service, they feel almost better about it than the person receiving the service. And so that big heart for people. But I would say those are the three key attributes. They have to be somebody who can be social, relate to all kinds of different people, and different backgrounds, etc. Results orientation, and then detail orientation. Now, drilling down a little bit to the leasing manager, that's really about social ability, and I also think steadiness. Somebody who's comfortable kind of doing the same thing every day, and actually prefers that kind of style of work. You and I, Mark, we're the types, like, if every day was 100% different, I would be excited. Like, I like waking up and having a challenge to tackle, or even an opportunity to explore, right? Maybe not necessarily a problem, or something like, oh, we can go build this better. But some people really like that steady work and that consistent work. And so that's what we look for in the leasing managers, because they need to be social to adapt to the person that they're taking on the tour. But that tour does start to look effectively the same over time, because we have a written process we ask them to follow. So that steadiness is also a key factor for the leasing manager.
100%. And so the better we get that, the more easily that they can build trust. And trust is something that people are looking to live. Like, they're where they live with their residents, like, it's really important. And a lot of times, we want to make sure that our assets, they stand above when it comes down to the like visually appealing. We want to make sure that our renovations are top notch. We never want to lose anybody from that. We want to make sure that the tour is in a format that is done in the right way. The amenities we want to be, top notch. But I mean, when it comes down to it, any small difference can make the difference of them selecting your apartment versus, say, a competitor out there. And so building trust with the property manager is the biggest determinant of somebody saying, yeah, you know what, I want to come live there because I know they're going to look after me. I just had a really great relationship with them. So that property manager is so important. So it's so important.
Yeah.
And so, John, the next thing that we'll do, why don't you talk a little bit about the 3 guarantees that are just not normal,
Yeah.
but we really wanted to, go above and beyond to make it, when a resident walks into one of our Faris Residences buildings, that it's very clearly different than the competitors out there. Because
Yeah.
one of the things that we've realized that successful businesses have, and what made us successful, and I know, John, with you through the years as well, is that you don't only want to be better, which is really important, but you want to try to be different as much as possible as well. And so that's kind of a good segue, John. Maybe you could talk a little bit about our 3 promises that we do, or guarantees that we offer residents when they come in.
Yeah, that's right. So what we know is that, it's a big decision. And so I sometimes think about the car business when I think about sales, because the stats on the car business are quite interesting. The average car buyer goes to 1.5 car dealerships. And so if you think about that, well, why is that? Well, probably about 50% of the car dealers don't close. And so they go to the next guy who closes, right? And so that ability to ask for the sale is something we look for in these property managers and leasing managers as well, part of that curated process. But when you can attach a guarantee to it, it relieves some of that pressure that the buyer, the resident in this case, is feeling, because we're not asking them to buy a book or a product, or make a $25 purchase here. We're asking them to lay down effectively 30% of their income, and where they're going to raise their children or retire or whatever. And this is very important. And we treat these residents as like almost like owners, in the sense of like, what would an owner want in this home if this were their home? That pride that they experience at the end of a hard day's work is important. And so to help relieve some of that pressure they're feeling, to ensure they're making the right decision, which, by the way, we put, Faris's name on these buildings, right? And the reason I mention that is that, at the end of the day, it's like the company, it's our reputation. We don't name it some generic name. Like, we slap Faris name on it. And so that's a mechanism as well. But these guarantees are important to us, and it's part of our tour, where we talk through these at actual multiple steps in the tour. But the first one is the happy in your home. And so What can happen is you move in and, maybe, the resident next door works nights and, or maybe the resident, I should say, better example, they work nights and then there's like 16 kids running around in the unit next door. That's an extreme example. We wouldn't allow that to happen, but I'm using it just to illustrate a point where maybe it's just not a good fit. And a couple of things on our side we know is that if the resident's not happy, then we're probably not going to be happy either. So we say in the first 30 days, if you move in and maybe you realize your commute's 45 minutes and you thought it was going to be 20, or whatever the thing is, we'll release you of that lease within that first 30 days if you're just not satisfied. So it actually helps us out because we can make sure we get a resident that's a better fit for the community, but that resident doesn't feel like they're stuck. The reality is nobody's taken advantage of that guarantee yet, but it's out there. It helps just ease that pressure. The second one is the in your corner guarantee. This one's my favorite because guess what? Life happens, right? And there are circumstances sometimes outside of the resident's control that can have a major impact on their life, say a job transfer to, it's an opportunity to get this great new income or a promotion, but, they're stuck in this lease. And so now they're having to make this decision. Do I pay thousands of dollars to break the lease? And all of a sudden that promotion doesn't look so great because, you're spending that money. Or God forbid, there's a family member that gets sick and you need to move to help them. I mean,
Mhm.
my wife had been going through that recently with her father in stage 4 cancer, and she thankfully had the ability to take off work, but some people don't. And so they may have to move in. So what we say to our residents is if you can document, a handful of these examples, job transfer, loss of job, not due to, your performance. So in other words, you just get fired. That's a little bit different. But we say, look, bring in that documentation and we'll release you of the lease. We actually came up with that because in the United States, we're required to do that for the military on any circumstance where they're deployed. And so we thought to ourselves, why not just offer that to everybody? Because life does happen and these unplanned events can have major impacts. And so, we'll just release you of the lease. And then the third is the speedy service, which I think is actually probably the most important to the resident. It's just that idea that we were going to make any maintenance request repair within 24 hours. Honestly, we're moving towards same day. It's just we say 24 hours today, but the pressure is around same day, unless we have to order some sort of part, right? If it's an HVAC repair and we need a third party contractor to come in. Now, it's funny that all said, we actually have our maintenance techs get HVAC certified, so they can even do a lot of those repairs. So, when somebody has something go wrong in their unit, the sink is backed up, or there's a water leak, or whatever, we're going to handle that same day, or certainly within 24 hours. And so those three guarantees really differentiate us in the marketplace, and I think demonstrate to the resident that we care before they even show up and move in.
100%, John. And, maintenance issues. I was getting my hair cut, and his name's Alberto, and he's telling me about how upset he was with his landlord because he had been following up for months and months and months because the toilet wasn't working. Eventually, he ended up bringing his brother in, and he ended up fixing it, but he was so upset, and he ended up actually leaving that apartment, and he went after another one that was actually it was actually he was really happy with the new one, but he's like, I would never have moved if we just would have fixed that issue. And this is such a common it's such a common piece of feedback that we get, and it's so avoidable. That's the thing, John, that gets me. It's so avoidable. The problem, or we'll say the challenge, is that as the owner, that unless you have some sort of catalytic mechanism in some sort of, we'll say, feedback loop to give you feedback that these things aren't happening, you'll just never know about it. And so
Yeah.
what we do is by offering this up front with the residents, we need to give a concession if we don't deliver within
Yeah.
that time frame. Now, of course, there might be a part that need to be ordered, and so that would be more so the asterisks with it. If there's a part that needs to be, we'll do whatever we can to have some sort of short-term solution in, but somebody's coming out, and if it can be fixed, it's within that time frame. But we got to give a concession. And so we'll get that feedback that we gave that concession. And so that's a feedback loop for us saying, okay, why wasn't that done? And
Hmm.
so they call this a catalytic mechanism, just like Google reviews, right? So that's as an owner, you start to see a lot of those come through. That's feedback showing that the management company is not doing a great job. So by offering this up front, it forces the on-site maintenance tech to be on the ball. It forces the property manager to be on the ball when these maintenance requests comes through. Otherwise, we're going to be informed that something's coming out of our pocket. And so the guarantee is such a strong offer because you better believe that the residents are coming in to our buildings have lived at other communities in the past, and they have their own stories, and majority of the stories are based on the existing owner, the property management not being fast with those maintenance issues.
Yeah, no, and it's the gift card, right? We give a gift card, Visa gift card if we're unable to meet that guarantee, and we incentivize those maintenance techs, right, to get it done as well. You mentioned reviews, and this was interesting experience for me because at my prior company, I got every single customer survey. We actually, it was residential real estate, but we would survey the listing seller, 5 times throughout the transaction. I got every single one. So when we started taking these buildings down, I reached out to the property management companies. I'm like, hey, I want to get those reviews. And it was like the feedback I got was no other operators ever asked us for that. And, it's what we get most excited about, right,
Yeah,
Mark? When we see that 5-star review come
100%.
in, we celebrate it. Like
Yeah.
Mark and I, like we forward it to the on-site team, like congratulations, like give
Yeah.
kudos.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, we want them to know we're paying attention and that we appreciate it, and we appreciate that level of service they're providing. So, yeah, it's big for us. That is the big part of that 28-day transformation, just transforming that entire property management team into a culturally strong group of people who care about people, that genuine love of people, and that focus on an exceptional experience.
For sure. So far we've changed out the property manager. We've implemented the 3 guarantees, right? The happy living, the in your corner, and prompt service guarantees. And then what we do is the exterior updates. So
Yeah.
the exterior updates is something that the residents can see that first and foremost. So they can see very clearly if anything on we'll say at the community is changing. And so some examples of this would be painting the exterior building. So when we took the 104 units down in Largo, for those of you that are not sure, Largo is pretty much where Tampa is. It's right beside Tampa there in Florida. And so when we took this asset down, we repainted. How many buildings are there, John? I think there's like 16 buildings
Yeah,
all
that's
around.
right.
And
Exactly right.
so in that community, we repainted the exterior of all the buildings within that 28-day time frame. That was one example. And then we did all new landscaping, and then we started adding the amenities, which is the next one. But the exterior updates, by doing it quick, it allows new residents that are coming on to see, wow, this is really well maintained. And the existing residents are saying, wow, that was a big change real quick.
Well, and it's so important because you said something earlier where we actually had a review come in recently from a resident at one of our properties that had been there for 10 plus years and had seen 3 different owners and property management groups within that 10-year period. And so, without having been there, I can only assume, but I imagine there had been 1 or 2 of those owners, just, some are, just operate differently, that just came in, didn't really do a whole lot of anything, but just started cranking the rents up. And so as a resident, you're going, wait a minute, some new owner comes in, nothing's really changed, but now I'm paying, 20, or, $200 more a month in rent. And so they're likely to leave, right? So by coming in and showing that, yes, we're a new owner, they're already concerned. They're going, what is this new owner going to do? What's going to change? People don't like change, right? And so that's change. So by coming in and doing those exterior renovations immediately, and this landscaping, I mean, gosh, at our Largo property, going back to that one, we put over $120,000 in landscaping in. I mean, just really spruce the place up. You mentioned a few other things, but new door hardware, new exterior lights. We actually relocated the door unit number designator over to the wall. It just gives it a little bit of a fresher, more modern look. But the lights we put in were bright, so it just provides a kind of a level of I'd say safety, I suppose, where it just feels like easier to come in late at night and not concerned about not being able to see. And what we found is by doing all those exterior renovations, when we started having conversations with current tenants about renewal, they were happy to do it because they we're provided something of value, right? To circle it all back to where we started, they feel the value provided, and coming home, or maybe at the holidays, their friends and family come by, they're proud to show off where they live, and that's super critical to success in this business.
100%. And this is where economies of scale comes in here, John, because 120,000, that's a lot of money. But the beauty of this is that that's spread out over 104 units, right? So it's pretty much $1,000 per unit.
Yeah.
And so the beauty of this is that if you were to say do that for a house, for example, that doesn't go very far, right?
Yeah.
But when you take that the 100,000+ and you do it on one location, there's one site, you can see that dollar go a lot further. And
Hmm.
so that is the economies of scale is so powerful when you start to get into the larger units, because your dollar goes a lot further, and we get way better deals than if say a residential owner that has one property that calls up the landscaping company to say, yeah, I'd like to do something, versus we're coming in saying, hey, listen, we not only will we potentially, here's the job for you, but you potentially could get the maintenance uh, contract as well, which is a big contract, right? Doing it on
Yeah,
these assets that are multiple acres large. And so the exterior is a really big part. Now,
that's
the
right.
next one, what we do is, in general, when we buy these assets, they're like 95% occupied, which means that there's about, in this case, this 104 units here, there was, and same with our Charleston, the 144 units, John,
Hmm.
that we took down. In general, like 95% occupied in general, which means there's about 5%, so 5 to 10 units potentially that are vacant. So what we do within that 28 days is we'll go in and we'll renovate those right off the bat, and upon closing, to get those units leased out at the higher rents that we project as well.
Yeah, no, it's a big component of it, and we do a open house, which I know we'll touch on a little bit more with all the current residents. They're able to tour it, and so we've actually found that a lot of residents that are currently in the building would love that updated, upgraded, renovated unit. So sometimes we're able to move somebody from a classic unit, an unrenovated unit, over to that renovated unit at that higher rent, and now we've opened up a vacancy where we can renovate that unit and bring a new tenant in. So yeah, it's a critical component to the success of the 28-day transformation.
And then, John, why don't you share a couple of the amenities that we would go in as part of this 28-day full transformation plan that we've added to our assets since acquiring them?
Absolutely. It's very important to be thoughtful about where you spend your money, because ultimately, if it isn't generating additional income, then you have to question whether to do it. And so, a good example would be of something we wouldn't do is we wouldn't put a pool into a property that didn't already have one. It's just very expensive. There's a lot of permitting that's required and safety concerns. And so, we love assets with pools already there, and then we can spruce that area up. So, Largo is a great example where we put all new furniture in. They actually had a grilling station in the pool area, which I don't think was really convenient for the people at the pool or the people doing the grilling. So we actually relocated that, and in that space put a huge couch in. It's actually a large sectional with like a little eating area. So it made it more useful for the residents. And then the grilling station we relocated and put in some game stations, cornhole, and a nice pergola with some landscaping. And every time I go to that asset now, there's people out there grilling where nobody used it at the pool. So it's actually added value, but it's very inexpensive. I mean, putting
Yeah.
up a pergola, or a landscaping crew can do that. Maintenance team can keep it up, as the life of the asset, they can kind of keep it in shape. And, a few, grills, right? And it's added exceptional value. Another example is, gym. People want to be able to have a gym. And so the property in Largo had a very small gym. So we took an old, it was sort of like a maintenance shed that was within the leasing center. So we actually relocated that offsite and doubled the size of the gym. And so that's another great example. And just little small things you can do. We always have water bottles and some Gatorades in there for the residents that use that gym. And Charleston, some dog parks, right? We've touched on dogs on previous podcasts, but people love their pets. And as an owner, you don't want, dog stuff all over the property, right? So you create a little dog park. It's a nice extra amenity, but it also helps keep the rest of the property in good condition. So a lot of these things we're talking about are a few $1,000s, $100, some fencing, a few agility pieces of equipment for the dogs there. And now you've added a really great benefit that anybody with a dog would be looking for. So it's critical to not only look for, amenities that people will care about, but amenities you can execute on without a lot of money, because ultimately, once again, putting in a pool will not really see that we won't get a return on that investment within the time of our ownership, unfortunately.
Yeah, well said, John. And so this is all being delivered within 28 days. So you can start to see how this is starting to stack one upon another, right? From value delivery standpoint, anyways. The next thing we'll do is we'll go in and stage the leasing center and the model suite. So we'll renovate the model suite into our standard, and then we'll stage it, and we'll stage the leasing center as well. And so, John, this is one of the things that getting into the business, especially getting into the larger assets, when we're talking tens of millions of dollars. I was really shocked that majority of the competition that we walk into is not professionally staged. And this was shocking for me, both of us coming from the residential real estate side, where we stage pretty much all of our properties. This is something that is just not prevalent in the multifamily space.
Yeah. So my view there is that how you do one thing is how you do everything. And subconsciously, I think if you walk in and you're a resident or a potential resident, and the leasing center is a disaster, there's paper stacked everywhere. Maybe there's like a little feature sheet, but there's no flyers in the box. And it's just, so whether they know it or not, like, the resident is calculating all this, and like it's adding up, and they're saying like, because ultimately, if you can't even keep the leasing center tight, which is the sales center, right? They're probably subconsciously thinking, what happens when something goes wrong at my unit, or what happens here? So, that first impression. So it's a critical component. And, once again, something you can do very inexpensively. I think one of the things we knew that we would do immediately on our deals is bring in a designer who professionally does this stuff for a living, right? Make sure that we have a designer making these color choices. And so in our interior renovations, which I know we've already touched on, but a designer came up with that upgrade list. And so by executing on that with the designer alongside us, we just really create an exceptional first experience. And so, all the way down to making sure we have a refrigerator stocked with, interesting drinks. So it's not just like some, Dasani bottled water. We bring in the sparkling waters and some teas and coffee and snacks for the kids, goldfish or gummies or whatever. So that way, sometimes you're taking a tour and you have your kids with you, and like the kids can now go have a snack. So, mom and dad can focus on this important thing. So that leasing center and model suite experience is so huge, all the way down to, we have a branded scent that we use in all of our buildings, right? We have a branded music playlist. It's just all those little things add up to a big thing. And just to circle all back around, how you do one thing is how you do anything. And so we do everything with excellence.
Yeah, well said. And the scent thing, like, we just went back and forth on the kind of mailing back and
Yeah.
forth. I know I had Joanna involved. I know you had Megan as well
Oh,
at
the
one
kids,
point.
everybody. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it's
Well,
funny. So to get the vision, you get all these little pallets
yeah,
of smell. They're on these little like pieces of cardboard. But then they gave me all these coffee beans, and it took me a minute to realize, oh, that's to cleanse my palate.
the
So we're
cleansing.
sniffing
Yeah,
coffee, sniffing the thing, but we came up
yeah,
with a good one.
yeah,
And so but all those things make a difference. So when somebody comes in, it's just well thought out, and
yeah.
whether they're clocking it or not, consciously they recognize it, and it's why. I mean, our Largo property is near 100% occupancy.
Yeah.
Charleston, very similar. And, we talked to other operators in the area, and they're saying they're struggling right now because of seasonality. But, it's funny. I think about residential real estate where there are quarters that just are naturally slower. The fourth quarter is really, the first quarter is the slowest typically, but you can feel it a little bit in the fourth quarter, or particularly in like November. But we just didn't accept it. We're just like, yeah, we get it, but people are still selling, so maybe we just need to get more market share, right? And so that's how we think about it. It goes back to, we're not okay with okay. We want to be exceptional in everything we do.
100%. And once we selected that, it's rinse and repeat. And so
Yeah,
nothing scales like repeatability.
yeah,
And so that's where we spend a lot of time up front to get our look, to get our feel, to get our process, to get our system, to get our delivery down pat, we write that down, and then it's just a matter of rinse and repeat on all of our assets. So we're not
That's
having
right.
to go through, what's our cent on the next bill. It just is.
Yeah,
And so
yeah.
that helps us deliver on execution much quicker moving forward, and it allows us to tweak. And if we learn one thing in one asset, we can apply that to all the assets in a systematic approach.
That's right.
And so this is where it kind of brings it full circle into the resident appreciation event. So John, that was just such a, it was the last one we were at, and in Largo is just a really great just overall experience, because not only is it good to get just overall feedback speaking one-on-one with the residents, but it's just something that they're just not used to. And it
Yeah.
seemed to be like they're almost like shocked that we were doing this. So maybe
Yeah.
what are some of the things that we did at the event, John?
Yeah,
The
yeah.
last one that we were at anyways.
Yeah, and it's so much fun. So what we'll do is we'll typically bring in a Kona ice truck, so kind of the dessert for the kids. We bring in a food truck. So I believe down in Largo we had like a kind of a taco burrito kind of thing, and provided a free meal for all the residents. And so we send letters out, we knock on doors, making sure they're aware of the event. But we kind of pitch it as, hey, like take the night off cooking, just dinner on us. We'd love to have you swing by, check out the new leasing center, the model suite, and the new amenities that we put together here in the last 30 days. We also did giveaways, right? So we had a couple of HD TVs and a couple other little kind of smaller things, and then we actually gave away a free month's rent as well. So that got a lot of excitement. But I think the coolest part was just the time spent with the residents, and that ability just to walk around, shake some hands, meet folks. We're new here. We just acquired the property. What do you like about it? Is there anything you wish were different? If you could wave a magic wand, what's one thing you would have, kind of thing. And then getting that feedback in. But really what was happening is the residents just felt like we're paying attention and we're listening. And, it goes back to, we talk to the property management companies quite often. And I asked the regional manager for that, that larger companies, it's like she's over Florida. And I said, how many operators that you do business with do events like this? And she said, none. She said, if they do a resident appreciation event, usually it's like a wine and cheese thing and they don't show up. It's just, and guess what? The residents don't show up either, because like, who cares, right? Like, do I want a couple pieces of cheese and a glass of wine? Like, no, thanks. So it's just that willingness to be there and on the ground and having those conversations. And, we got some really great feedback about things they liked. We got some sharp criticism. Now we just took the building over, but we were able to immediately apply that. And a great example is we brought in a new leasing manager who was fluent in Spanish, because we recognized that that was a miss, that was something the property did not have in the past. And a large percentage of our residents could speak English well, but felt more comfortable speaking Spanish. And so I only speak English, so it's not something I can specifically relate to. But when you're emotional about something, I can imagine you'd rather speak in your mother tongue and not the language you recently learned, right? And so just having that person there, we get specific reviews about that today. I mean, we literally got one a couple days ago just saying Martha was phenomenal. She speaks Spanish. She really helped me navigate this challenging situation. So it's really about that more so than, we bought you dinner. It's just, hey, we're here. What can we be doing differently to make your living experience better?
Yeah, 100%. So, and this is where we cast the vision. So it's like, here's the mission of the community now. Here's our values that we're making our decisions through. And so we actually do that, we cast that vision at that point after we delivered all of this value. And then what happens is when the renewals come, that's where you start to see the magic actually happen. And so there's a lot of work that went up until that point. But the interesting thing is that a lot of the stuff that we're doing is probably with a lot of operators. Eventually they start to sprinkle it and is delivered through the hold period of, say, if you hold it for a 5-year hold period, there's a number of things that are slowly done because they have to, not because they proactively do it. And so by doing it up front, they get the full value of that. We get the full value throughout this whole period. And a couple that we're not talking about hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars, the extra things that we're doing. A lot of it is just intentionality. It's intentionality is what it is. And being, say, intentional within the first 4 weeks, we're going to go in and deliver all of this value. And by doing it, it is such a competitive advantage. huge competitive advantage. And this is how our investors benefit from this greatly. And moving forward, every asset that we take over, we learn something and we apply that to the next one and the next one. We're a learning organization, and our investors get the benefit of that moving forward. So, John, this was just a really good conversation, and I felt that we were able to communicate at least the main points. Now, there's a lot of other things that are done. We just hit on the main points that we do. Whenever you take over a building, there's hundreds and hundreds of things, but these are the main things that stand out that really have given we'll just say, a unfair advantage to all of our investors. And, we've seen the benefits of this. So it was a really good episode to be able to, share that for all the listeners out there.
Yeah, no, it was one of the first things we wrote down in terms of a plan. I mean, on day one, it was like we need to have something that gives us an edge, and that's where the 28-day transformation came out of. And you said it, a lot of these operators, it's just the lack of intentionality. And 2 years later, they start doing the exterior work. And I've actually seen some examples of a deal, we both invested in that we don't operate, where they drag their feet and then the market experienced some challenges, and now it's like they're playing catch up. And the challenge now is that money's tight, and so they're pulling back and then maybe not doing what they had said they were going to do. And so for us, the capital's in, let's deploy it, let's get that full value through the whole 5-year hold period, and not do it in year 3 just to polish the place up to sell, right? Like, and it is that competitive advantage that allows us to achieve above projection results.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. Very good. So just a few takeaways here, guys. The main approach of this 28-day transformation is based on this rule of reciprocity. Give first before asking. And when it comes to value add investing, if you can do this within the first 4 weeks, it will make a tremendous impact within the community that you buy. So it's based on the rule of reciprocity. Give first before asking. Now, the caveat to this is that if you are in a market that is, we'll say, there's rent control as in there's restrictions as to how much you can raise rents each and every year, this approach may not work very well there. And it won't work very well because you can go in and just create an amazing experience. So I'll share an example. In Ontario, Canada, we have some properties. We have a portfolio up there, and so there are some buildings where we have units that when we purchased a number of years ago, there were existing residents that were paying very low rents, and so $1,000 below market rents, and so. And we'll do another episode on rent control as well. But pretty much, there's still $1,000 below market rent because we've only been able to raise it by 1% or 2.5%. If you're in one of these markets that is very heavy rent control, in the case that I'm sharing in the Ontario properties, I just can't raise rent. I can go and deliver an amazing experience and add all this value, but we just can't raise rents anymore. So we can't be properly compensated. So this approach that we're talking about doesn't work in all markets. And John, to be quite frank, this is why we're not investing in any other markets that have rent controls in them,
Right.
because that doesn't allow us to run the buildings the way that we want. And so that's a whole other conversation. But this approach only works if there's no rent control in the markets that you're investing in. That's really important to get this point.
That's right. Key component for sure. We only look in markets where it's business friendly, and I hesitate to say landlord friendly, because what I've learned, and if you study the science, the landlord friendly markets tend to have more moderated rent, because landlords are incentivized to build and own and maintain properties, right? So for us, that looks like the southeastern United States.
Yeah, right on. Well, thanks for listening, guys. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe and share with other high net worth investors that you think will benefit from it. Thanks for tuning in to the Multifamily Investor Playbook. We love and believe in you guys. Keep dreaming and investing big.